Hey, one more thing before you go. Have you ever asked the questions, how do I write a song or make an album? What exactly is philosophy? Or better yet, what's the meaning of life? Stay tuned. We're going to talk to a man that could possibly answer each and every one of those questions and does so every week on his podcast. I'm your host, Michael Herst. Welcome to One More Thing Before You Go. My guest in today's show is Joel Bouchard. He's a doctoral student in psychology, a multi-instrumentalist, a record producer and author, a painter, an Army veteran, a business leader, and a fellow podcaster who firmly believes that generalists have a place in society and can make contributions to human knowledge. And he does so through that podcast. I've heard it. We're going to talk about that. He may not be an expert in any one field, but is an expert learner who is well versed in a wide array of areas that fits right in with my interdisciplinary opportunities. While he has a philosophical mind and prefers big picture conversations, that knits together disparate concepts on his podcast From Nowhere to Nothing. We're going to delve into details on many of the topics that he talks about, including music, education, psychology, and the military, and so much more. Welcome to the show, Joel.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
You got an amazing journey here that I'm excited about sharing.
Yeah. No, I often say that I am blessed with the life that I've had thus far, and I'm hoping to have quite a bit more. So,
You know, it's interesting when we're going to talk about your life here in about 2 seconds, but when we don't always know where our path is going to take us, when we start off in this path of life, but sometimes we have the diverse opportunity to be able to explore many things within life that allows us to grow and experience and be happy and learn and educate and inspire and motivate. And I can't wait to do some of that with you here now.
yeah.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Where'd you grow up?
So I'm from Western New York. I'm still there, so I'm a little bit outside Buffalo. So despite the fact that it's not December yet, I'm looking at over a foot of snow outside.
You got a foot of snow right now?
Yes.
Boy, I don't miss that. See, I'm from Colorado. I grew up in Colorado. So when we grew up in the mountains, like 8,500 feet up behind Pikes Peak. So we got 30-inch snows, all times of year. Snow in October wouldn't leave until May and maybe sometimes May or June. But yeah, that's a little early, buddy.
Yeah. No, Colorado is probably the only place that's worse because in Buffalo, like you just know you're going to get hammered in the winter, and it is what it is. But I feel like Colorado's that spot where you'll see like, oh, there was a 90-degree temperature swing. It went from 96 to 6 degrees and dropped 36 inches of snow in 24 hours. And I go, oh, well, that's brutal.
Yeah, that's it. The old cliche. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes, it'll change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up with that. It's like it's cold outside, just wait.
Yeah.
It's hot outside, just wait. It's okay. Just give it a little bit here. Go have a juice. It'll be changing. Did you? Excuse me. Do you have any brothers, sisters? What was your family like?
Yeah. I've got a brother who's 4 years older than me and a sister who is 2.5 years younger.
And did you? What's your family like?
I had a mom and dad. They were married their whole lives. My dad died a couple of years ago, but no, it was really great. They were both uh, really smart, loving individuals who I cherish to have every day, and it's I can't complain.
Can't complain. Well, I see musical instruments behind you, so I know that you're into music. You're a painter. You're an author, and you're an Army veteran. Would you? Would you want to be when you grew up? When you were a kid, what did you think? Do you want to be a musician? Do you want to go into the Army?
No. I wanted to be an architect. I had, underneath the stairs of our house, there's a little, kind of a little cubby where you could get underneath. And I had an office in there. I had office supplies and everything was all organized and put to rights. And yeah, I thought being an architect would be really cool when I grew up, but that changed when I got older.
That's it's I think I probably changed I probably changed my ideals about 100 times growing up. What I wanted to be. I ended up following a path of being in law enforcement, which I am grateful for because it allowed me to accomplish some things that I really wanted to accomplish and contribute back to the world, which is great. You had the opportunity to contribute back. Well, number one, you served our country, and thank you for your service. We appreciate that. But you serve it in the form of creative arts, which I think is like a brilliant way to make a contribution to society. Had you always been into music?
No, not at all. Actually, it's funny because I didn't even listen to music until I got to be a teenager, until I was 13. I don't know why. It didn't really appeal to me much. And then when I was 13, I started listening to classical music, and then it's sort of went into some blues, and then the most teenage boy story ever. When I was 15, three of my friends said, "Hey, let's start a band." And none of us played any instruments. So we just went around the room and we said, you'll play drums, you'll play bass. I got guitar. And we just taught ourselves how to play instruments, and we wrote some songs, and we got pretty good. We played some local talent shows, and we recorded a cassette tape back when those were a thing. And then when we were 19, my drummer got married very young, and my bass player went out of state to go to college. And so I was kind of just starting to get into music and get into creating music. And I said, "Oh man, I don't want it to end here. So what do I do?" Right? It seems silly to go to my other friends and try to do the same thing again. All right, hey, you play drums, you play bass. Now just take 4 years to learn the instruments, right? So instead, I took my life savings and I bought the pieces of a computer, and I built a recording computer, and I bought a drum set and bought a bass guitar and bought all the stuff for a recording studio, and had no idea what I was doing and just kind of figured it out. And that's how it works to this day. In the room that we're in right now, I record all the separate pieces and put them together and mix and master them and release them from here.
That's amazing, self-taught man from all that perspective. I know what a board looks like and how all that pieces together. That's what an amazing, inspirational task that you completed in doing so. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's partially inspirational and partially unfortunate. I always tell people that when I tell that story, it's not so much out of pride as you know as out of, man, I wish I had had a mentor. I wish if I'd had somebody who was able to teach me and help me, I would have made progress much quicker than I did. But no, it is a testament to I people's ability to figure things out.
Well, exactly. I mean, you're a lifelong learner, as your bio says, and being a lifelong learner, I think that we have an advantage. I'm the same way that you are. We have that advantage of understanding the inquisitive aspect of it and what makes it work and how it works and how to implement it and how to, fit it in. And I think that gives us an advantage with regard to somebody that has gone through and I'm not dissing this because I have 2 degrees, going through 4 years, a 4 year degree, and it's taken up 4 years of study to come up to the same thing that we had the opportunity to kind of figure out a little sooner. But yeah, mentors are always good. It's great when you get to ask somebody, "Hey, come here, show me."
Yeah, yeah.
Pardon me, let me help you with this. Why'd you join the military?
Yeah, so I think that part of it was yeah, when you're a little boy, you dream of being in the military. That's kind of what I think most little boys think of that. And then it did hurt when I got my associate's degree from community college, and then I went to apply to a bachelor's degree at a 4-year school, and saw it's going to be $20,000 a year, and didn't want to take out student loans. So I thought, well, I've always wanted to join the military, and college is kind of outside my reach. So the goals seem to coincide some.
So kind of pieced together that way. You went into the Army, Navy, Air Force?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to the army. I I had s- I scored a 98 on my ASVAB, and the instructor pulled me aside afterwards and he said, you should really do something different. But I wanted to shoot guns. I wanted to do all of the macho stuff. So I joined the army. In retrospect, it probably would have been better for career prospects to have joined the Air Force or some other skilled field. But no, I went with the army.
Hey, this works. This works. The whole aspect is experiencing life. That's what we're here for, to experience life in all aspects. So you got to experience that portion of life, and that works. So the excuse me. What made you decide to go back to school for? I mean, you're working on your doctoral. What do you have a degree in prior to that? Is it psychology as well?
Yeah, so I'm true to the interdisciplinary background, right? Because my associate's degree is in criminal justice. My bachelor's degree is in interdisciplinary studies. My master's degree is in education, and now I'm working on a doctorate in psychology. So we're all over the
Oh,
map.
all over the map. That works. Yeah, interdisciplinary. I, I didn't realize we were interdisciplinary buddies here. We're alumni
Yeah.
with that. See, yeah. The School of Interdisciplinary Studies over at ASU was one of the first programs that was implemented. So I got in on the ground level of interdisciplinary studies and loved every aspect of it. Being able to, well, that's why I combined it with performance and art and digital media. And, I had my choice, which I think is like brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. What brings you to psychology?
So I think, psychology is interesting because it comes out of philosophy, right? And philosophy is obviously something I'm interested in. So I viewed the two as having a feedback loop, right? Psychology, the discipline of psychology developed out of philosophical thoughts about how humans think. But then again, the only way we're able to philosophize is by utilizing our psychology. So the two are related very closely. And so, when we're thinking about philosophical questions, a lot of them come back to questions about us, our ontology, right? What it means to be us, to experience things, that sort of subjective experience. So that's kind of what drew me to psychology.
It's a. I had to take some psychology classes when I was going through both. Well, actually, I have my criminal justice degrees were back in community college. I have two associates with that. But the when I went to my bachelor's degree and then when I went into my master's, we were required to do some psychology classes. I found it fascinating in all the different philosophies and the way that they integrate within our brain in the different approaches to how our brain works. I have a niece that actually is a psychologist, and she's a working doctor, but she went more towards child psychology in regard to that. But she also took a not your typical, book style psychological approach to helping these kids. She kind of geared off a little bit more of a I won't say free range, but allowed more freedom with understanding, and working with the kids instead of reading in certain books. Well, Freud says this, or Jung says that, or blah 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 blah. She kind of broke away from that, and she's pretty successful about that. Is that the same kind of approach that you're learning, or what direction do you want to come out of this?
Yeah, I think that as far as therapeutic applications go, I think that you need some of that because our understanding of human psychology is sort of limited by our technology in some way, right? We think of the behavioralist thought of people as only their actions, not their thoughts, and then the cognitive psychologists think of the human brain as a computer, right? But these things are all sort of false equivalencies. That's not the human brain is a unique thing that can't sort of be encapsulated by these abstract things that we try to use to define it. So when we're trying to address therapeutic issues and problems that people have, you need some intuition. Just, hey, I'm a human being, right? I've dealt with things. So what in my professional training and will make sense to implement, and what from my personal experience helps me, figure out what's going on in the situation. I am not. going into so I'm not going into therapy. There's kind of two different types of psychologists, right? You have those who go into therapy, counseling, and then you have research psychologists. So I'm more looking at kind of like neuroscience, right? Looking at people's brains under scanners and trying to figure out what exactly is going on.
That's pretty cool. I think we have a need for that, especially. And correct me if I'm wrong. I say from my observance, as a cop, of course, I'm a trained observer. Not being egotistical. That's my job. You're supposed to observe people. You're supposed to observe actions. You observe what's going on around you consistently. Even after I retired, I have a very hard time letting that go. I'm still one of those kind of individuals. When I go into a restaurant, I still look around at everybody. I look at the exits. I sit with my. It's cliche, but I sit with my back, to the door if at all possible, so I can see if anybody's coming in the front door. I watch people constantly. With regard to that, in watching today's society, in the way that has changed over the last several years, do you think that there's a you think there's a change, a significant change in the way that we as human beings are now reacting within that society and the societal changes that are taking place?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the important thing to do is sort of find the truth in the matter, right? Because since the beginning of time, there's always been the old generation saying that something's going to ruin the new generation, right? And it goes all the way back to Plato saying that writing was going to ruin the minds of people because once you could write things down, there's no need to memorize things, and your brain would turn to mush, right? And with every new technology, there's always some pushback about, oh, this is going to radically harm us, right? And it never turns out to be that way. And part of the reason for that is because the human brain is an adaptive organ, right? So a good example is cell phones. There's this concern that, hey, I remember the time when I had dozens of cell phone numbers or dozens of phone numbers memorized that I had to
Yes.
dial into a phone. And you go, oh man, kids these days would never be able to do that. Well, they would if they had as much practice as we did, but they don't need to. And so therefore they use their brains for other things. Whether it's positive or negative, there's just no point in memorizing phone numbers, right? And that's just what the brain does. If it gets used and if it has a purpose and a reason for doing things, it will do it. And if it doesn't, it won't get used for it. So all of that is to say, over the past several years, with we're seeing some advances in technology that are not equivalent to things that have happened in the past, right? Writing and radio and TV um, sort of are on a different level from social media, right? Social media is an interactive platform. It's predicated on taking advantage of kind of the dopamine and limbic system of individuals um, in an addictive way, right? And it can lead to some unhealthy outcomes. That being said, it's a tool, right? It's a useful tool. It allows me to keep in touch with friends across seas that I wouldn't have been able to before. It allows us to have conversations like this. So there's positives and negatives to the whole thing. And as is always the case, the picture is much more complex than any advocate or detractor wants to make it out to be. But I think that certainly it's undeniable that there is a change that has occurred that is on a different scale from what we've seen in history before.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think that um, real quick note on the phone thing. Yeah, I like you used to memorize it. Just like when I was a cop, I worked in a county that was 2,100 square miles. So you had 9 different
Mm.
districts. You memorized whenever you were working a district, you'd have to go memorize all the streets and where they were at and how they get there. Ask me to do that today, I'd be going, punch it into the GPS, please.
Yeah, yeah,
I was like, I don't think so.
right.
But yes, I think that, as a child growing up, as a young man growing up, I was a Star Trek fan. Of course, that was before Star Wars, but I'm still a Star Wars fan. So I, I'm not one of those one or the other's better. I like them both. But Star Trek, they had the first iPads. If you really watched the early Star Trek, they had an iPad. They had a tricorder. They had communicators. It was a preface to what was available today. So, from my perspective, because I had such a mind that was inquisitive and wanting to see that grow, I had a computer at a very young age when they first came out. I had one of the first Mac computers that came out. I have an Apple II, actually. It came out, I had it in 1983.
Hmm.
One of them sold for $265,000. I wish I'd have kept it. Hindsight, right?
Yeah.
It was, I'm going to trade this thing and get a better one. Um, but you look at today, I'm 64 years old. In realistically, my wife's parents won't embrace it. They come into this house and they hear me asking, I won't say the name out loud because she'll answer me, but Lexi, okay? They'll ask me as, oh, it's Lexi, what's the forecast for tomorrow? And he goes, why don't you just put a temperature gauge and a thing outside your door? And I'd be going, because I just asked Lexi, and Lexi can tell me. He refuses to embrace or come over that hump to this day and age because of that. He thinks that is, he got rid of a car and sold the car because it had a GPS built into it. He says, I just can't drive that.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of a situation. I was an individual that embraced it. I thought it was like absolutely cool. When we got computers in the car in the police department before I left, it was like you couldn't put them in there a while ago, of course, because they weren't available. But about 2 years before I left, we just got computers in the car, which was like an amazing step from humanity. It was like stepping on the moon, from our perspective, because it gave us the ability to do what we needed to do for part of our job right there in the car. And it just blew me away. But
There's a there's always learning curves and there's always hurdles with new technology, but you need to go into it with the mindset that, you know, groups of very smart people designed this thing to make life easier. And so
absolutely.
that's something that you see a lot with people who refuse to adopt technology, kind of similar to your wife's parents, right? They go, well, why is it so complicated, or why would I do that when I could do this? Well, it just kind of shows that there's not an understanding of the capability of the tool there, right? And it goes across generations. There's a lot of people who are my age or even a little bit younger that they want to stick with the technology that they had 5 years ago, right? And the world is
Uh,
progressing at such a fast rate, um, that yeah, you gotta keep on top of things, and being a lifelong learner does help with that because you're always curious. You're always curious
mhm.
about what the next thing has and how it can help.
What's your opinion on like Chat GPT and those kind of artificial intelligence platforms that allow us to be able to help us to function if done properly?
Yeah, it's interesting. We did a few episodes on Chat GPT. We even interviewed Chat GPT
Did you
on
really?
one.
I got to go
Yeah,
back and look
yeah.
at that one.
Yeah, yeah, if you scroll back a little ways, it might have been about a year ago or so. But yeah, and I interviewed an artificial intelligence researcher, Keelan Cooper, on an episode. And it's a complicated thing, right? The language models that they're currently using, people get worried about artificial intelligence taking over everything, right? The language models that they're using actually are only about as smart as a 2-year-old. But it's like a 2-year-old with a very sophisticated vocabulary, right? It's just making a probabilistic prediction on what the next word should be, right? And it's pulling data from a wide range of sources, but its cognitive abilities aren't quite there. Um, Now, artificial general intelligence, that's the big one, right? That's when you're on par with human capabilities. And there's been a lot of hubbub in the news over the past few days about um, OpenAI having this Q Star project that they were working on, and that it might be an artificial general intelligence. Um, who knows? It's too early to say. There's no reliable information on it. Um, but from what we've heard coming out of it, it scared the people at the company, right? And it should, right?
It should,
Because
yeah.
yeah, because if you are able to have a machine with the cognitive capabilities of a human, drawing on essentially the entire knowledge base of humanity, and you're just seeding it with a few parameters and hoping that it learns what to do in such a way that doesn't lead to a butterfly effect, a cascading snowball of possibly unforeseen negative consequences. It's a precarious place to be. So I think at this point, for the next, maybe 1 to 10 years, we're pretty safe. But beyond that, the horizon is pretty murky, and especially when you don't know what's going on behind closed doors at some of these tech companies.
So kind of what you're saying is Terminator might be coming true.
Yeah, I mean, then that's a whole different, it's a whole different discussion, right? The there's a disembodied nature to AI at this point, and it could do, it could do things to the infrastructure, but could it, there's no robot bodies out there waiting to
To kill
battle with
us.
humanity that I know of at this point.
Well, we could probably refer it back to HAL 2000.
Yeah, hell, yeah.
Yeah, remember HAL 2000, and HAL kind of said, "Well, I'm just gonna do this because I think it's the best thing to do." And if you're collateral damage, well, then that's just the way it is. Well,
Yeah, I think that was a more prescient view of AI than the Terminator model at this point. But
I like Terminator. I thought I'd just throw that one in there, and hey, you never know. Never 10 years, you never know. I mean,
yeah,
theoretically, I'm half cyborg because I've had these 8 operations because I got pinned between a suspect's car and my patrol car, so it did a lot
ooh,
of damage. So I have titanium in 2 knees, a hip, 2 shoulders, my foot. Um, yeah, I'm almost there. Close, close.
yeah,
Um, in regard to philosophy, I know that we had a little bit of a conversation in regard to philosophy and you studying that a little bit. Can you help our audience understand? You hear it. I mean, I understand it, but you hear it. People say, "Oh, well, that's the philosophy of so and so," or "That's the philosophy of this," or the religion is a philosophy, or things like this. Can you help us understand what is philosophy?
sure. And this is a question that I would have asked heading into community college, right? I was okay, it's an elective that I'll take, right? But what's it? It's about dusty books and old guys with big beards being mad at the world. What is it? And then I got into college, and my professor was Norm Gayford, the my co-host on From Nowhere to Nothing. So and he really just lit a fire in me about philosophy, and so now the uh, the elevator pitch I give about philosophy is that philosophy is everybody's favorite topic. They just don't know it, right? And that's because you can talk about anything philosophically, and that's what we do on the show, right? We talk about the big topics like God and time, but we also have done episodes on Disney princesses or entertainment franchise reboots or anything, right? And that's just sort of a byproduct of the the inquisitive nature of the lifelong learner, right? Somebody who is looking around the world, and that's it. It's a strange property of our reality, right? That if you look closely at something, suddenly it doesn't make sense anymore. Especially if you look at it under a microscope or through a telescope, the very big things and the very small things, right? But science can explain a lot for us, but at the beginnings of science and at the fringes of science, there's philosophy, right? There's this um, attempt to know things through rationalization, um, even if science isn't there to empirically, provide evidence due to technological limitations or whatever it may be. So yeah, anything's philosophical, right? Why your favorite color, why my favorite color is blue, right? How weird is that, right? What would cause a person to have a favorite color? Um, Up to this point, psychology can't answer that question. I'll tell you that. So it's up to philosophy. What is it about my history or my genetics or my evolutionary, the evolutionary path of humanity, or all of these things together? What is it that causes somebody to have a favorite color? So yeah, philosophy is just the practice of looking at anything and digging deeper, digging below the surface, and asking critical questions and examining things at a finer level.
Brilliant explanation. I think that will help people give a better understanding of what philosophy is and how it relates to us in today in society. I think that a lot of us sometimes forget that the philosophical aspect of life still needs to be there. I believe. I think that it's still relevant. I believe that if we don't have that philosophical look at everything around, I mean, look what they're finding out with the Webb. You mentioned space earlier with the Webb telescope now. They're seeing so many things so far away. Even the concept of it being able to see that far and to take those pictures, those brilliant pictures of what's out there, it is still a question. I mean, though it's science is showing there's the reality of it in your hand, but the philosophical side of it is how does that really exist, and why aren't we just reaching out and touching that?
Yeah, yeah, and the Webb telescope is a good example because although it was happening with the Hubble telescope beforehand, Webb really blew it wide open. Where you think you have this pretty good picture of how the universe developed, and all of a sudden you start to see these big organized structures much earlier than should have been possible for them to exist. And so you have to go, okay, well, we have to go back to the drawing board on some of our assumptions about how the universe took place. And so there's a very important relationship between science and philosophy. I think that especially in our modern day and age, right? Some people's religion is science, right? Which is to say that they expect science to explain things that science was never intended to explain, right? Science is limited in scope, and I can say this as somebody who's studying to be a social scientist, right? That's what I do is essentially science, and science is a process, right? It's a method, it's a way of approaching a problem. Um, but science never proves anything, right? You can offer support for a theory and you can disprove things, right? All it takes is one example of something to disprove a whole theory. But no matter how much evidence you have, you never prove a theory because at any time in the future, a contrary piece of evidence can disprove it, right? So people get frustrated with science because they go, "Oh, well, it's always changing," right? But to me, that's the beauty of it, right? Is no matter where you look, no matter what question you answer, in that answer, there's always 10 more questions to explore. And some people find that frustrating, but for me, I love the mystery of life, that it's so much stranger and more mysterious than anything you could uh, make up, right? And that's where philosophy comes in, is looking to the future, right? We so often think of it as being in the past, right? Well, science came out of philosophy. No, philosophy is where science is going in the future, right? You mentioned Star Trek earlier with science fiction, right? Before the technology existed to make communicators and iPads and then iWatches and these sorts of things, there were philosophers, right, trying to rationalize out, well, how could something like that work, and making it reality, right? So philosophy precedes science, and then science sort of takes the torch later on.
It's interesting how that all pieces together. Yeah, it starts with a thought, starts with a dream, and then trying to make that dream a reality. So I think you have to have the philosophical side of it, because if you don't have the philosophical side of it, it doesn't allow you to move forward to help develop it any more than that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very interesting. So the how do you think, if you don't mind, I know I'm not the typical Q&A type of conversationalist. I like most of my podcasts. If you listen to them, most of my podcasts are really organic. I do have like an outline that I like to kind of follow, but in this particular case, there were some questions that I had seen from you that I think they're really relevant to what we're talking about right now. What gave you the idea for the podcast and to bring your professor into it? Can I ask that? Because I think, say again, I've listened to it. It's a brilliant podcast. I'll have a link to it in the show notes for everybody. But y'all need to listen to this podcast because it will open your eyes in many instances of to what the possibility is of what does exist and what is out there and how things fit together within a certain way. And the conversations that you and your partner have, at least the ones that I've listened to so far, are brilliant in regard to opening up that possibility. So can we talk about what was your inspiration for starting the podcast and bringing him in?
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate you saying all those nice things about it. But yeah, where it started was, like I said, heading into college, I didn't know what philosophy was. I took a philosophy 101 with Norm and got super excited about it. And then I took every class that there was. Um, and so, and then we didn't talk for 10 years, right? And it was just part of, again, being somebody who always wants to do something new. 10 years after college, I thought, hey, I have all of this recording equipment from making music. Why don't I try making a podcast? That's something new. That's something different. And I thought, well, what would I make a podcast about? And I go, some of the favorite moments of my life were those philosophy classes, right? And so I thought, yeah, I'll bring Norm on and we'll try to recreate some of those discussions, just the two of us. And initially, we were just going to do 10 episodes on the biggest topics. And we got through the 10 episodes and we go, well, that's not going to fly. Like there's so many other things that you can talk about. And so we've kept going for 150 something episodes now. But yeah, the whole idea has always been to recreate the discussions of a philosophy classroom. And part of that is exploration, right? And failing. We're pretty open about it on the podcast. We always talk about how, hey, we're just spitballing stuff back and forth and we're going to put our foot in our mouths and we're going to say some things and then we're going to think about it and then we're going to contradict it later, because I think it's important for listeners to see that process, because that's how you learn things, right? You don't just learn things by getting them right 100% the first time, or, you don't just come to know something by hearing an argument one time and then accepting it. As a matter of fact, that's the problem with a lot of modern society, right? Is they take things from sources that they believe to be authoritative, and rather than questioning them and thinking about them for themselves, they just adopt those arguments, right? And that's not what philosophy is about. Philosophy is always about thinking about things critically. So, we take just one or two words, just a 1 or 2 word concept, and we look at formative aspects, what the historical thought has been. And then we do look at the essence of it. Norm and I try to hash out on our own what we think it means. And then we look at speculative elements. We try to ask questions about what we've talked about means for society or humanity or the future, right? And so all, of course, with the understanding that we're going to make some mistakes and we're going to figure some things out. And there's going to be some aha moments where we go, hey, I was thinking about it all wrong until just now. And, now I think I've got an insight that will probably change 5 minutes later when Norm brings up a new point, right? So it's all about that learning experience and not being afraid to fail, even on a public level, where there's, again, thousands of people listening to you, right? It's important to set that example and let people know that this is the way you get things done. This is the way you start to learn things and you start to have an idea about what the big world and reality out there is.
Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity for people to kind of at least get integrated into the possibility of. I wrote down some names of some of the ones that I've listened to, more recent ones, which I practiced this over and over again. I'm still probably going to get it wrong. Cosmogony.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I kept messing it up quite a bit. I had to spell it out almost phonetically.
I think I messed it up a couple times in the show. So
I don't feel too bad. Yeah, it's okay. I don't feel too bad. But in that episode, you guys discussed both the myths and the science surrounding the origins of the universe, which I found very, very fascinating. Because we all want to know the origins of the universe. We were talking about the Webb telescope earlier. I think that that's opening some doors for us. That's the reason I brought it up. I think it's opening doors for us that we never thought possible. When you look at, especially the brilliance in the pictures that it's coming back, because before, with the Hubble telescope, we had pictures, but they were never so clear as what's coming back with the Webb telescope, which is giving us a broader version of what is there and a more clear picture of what's there. I think, which is again is making people rethink the origins of our universe and how we got here. And yes, life is. Earlier, you mentioned something, and the first thing that hit me was life. You know, I watched both my daughters being born, and you think about just that in particular, that life being born, in the complexities of that life from conception to birth, and you know, you think that's a human being.
Hmm.
You know, the possibility of that human being now, and then growing and living and talking and learning and interacting and loving and, you know, hating and just everything. It blows my mind when you really, really think of the aspects that this has been going on for as long as it has, in that we're still able to procreate, and the procreation is no matter what race, color, creed, religion you are, a baby's a baby.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
And that it is a good window into the philosophical questions you can ask, right? Because you see a baby and just the complexity of it, right? And you go, well, what are the chances that human beings could be here, right? And you know,
Yep.
there's a lot of scientific theories about how it might have happened, but there's a lot of things in the science that seem highly improbable, right? And that gives a lot of people um, a reason to believe in religious views. And so we never bash anybody's beliefs on the show, because part of philosophy, and especially metaphysics, right, is it's outside of the purview of science. So it's unprovable stuff, right? Um, if if God decided that, he created the world yesterday, and he stretched all the starlight 13 billion light years, and he planted all the dinosaur bones and did all this stuff, well, he could probably do that because he's God. He has all the power, right? It seems unethical. It seems immoral.
Yeah.
And that raises philosophical questions. Well, what is morality? What is ethics, right? Or, thinking about the personality of the baby, right? Going through its whole life, right? And, well, is the grown adult the same person as the baby, or are they actually different people, right? When it's the ship of Theseus, right? If we replace your knee with a titanium one, are you still the same person? How much of you could we replace before you would no longer be Michael, right? It's yeah, life, all aspects of life, but especially, looking at humanity and just the viscera of the human being, which is part of the reason I got into psychology, right? Looking at the complexity of the human body and mind really is just an awe-inspiring thing.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So 3 o'clock tomorrow morning, expect a phone call that my revelation will be here as to answering that question. So it'll hit me about 3 in the morning, and I'll reach out. Yeah, it is, to me, it's like, the immense wonders of the world, I think, and how we live in it and how we're all connected in that perspective. I believe that it is unimaginable, but at the same time, it is innate that we need that connectedness and that we are all connected in that way. We all learn how to communicate and learn what emotions are and learn what a hug is and what it's meant for. and at the same tone you understand war and how that participates and the feelings from that and what takes place. It is it is the complexities of life, but the magic of life.
Hmm.
They talk
Yeah.
about does magic exist? When I watch both my kids being born, to me that's magic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I guess that would depend upon your level of what you feel or what you believe is magic. And in each of us individually, I think have to embark upon a journey of our own philosophical debate within ourselves to find out at what level do we continue to keep our ears and our eyes and our heart open and our eyes open to understand the learning and that we can continue to learn. That learning is a process that will continue, for the rest of our lives. Or we can choose to stop learning and stay where we're at and stay stagnant, which is unfortunate in some cases where you don't want to go over that and learn something new or learn something past that. But what an amazing opportunity for us to be able to get a grasp of where we're at in life and why we're here in the universe. Yeah, we could
Yeah.
talk further. Yeah, we could just keep doing that. Um, I got a couple questions I would like to ask you, though, if we can touch upon that. It's like a big turnaround here, really quick. I got to get my notes up because I wrote these down. I got to ask him this. We brought up in the beginning. So to reflect back on your music and your music career, I've always wondered this because, we just people that listen to songs, people that you have a song that it's like there are people with dementia that literally have dementia. My father-in-law was one of them. He had Lewy body dementia, but when you turn a certain song on, he'd smile and he'd remember that music. He'd remember that song, and he may not remember it. Unfortunately, he got to a point where he didn't remember who his own daughter was. But if you turn that song on, he'd light up because he remembered that song. What do you think from a musician's perspective, combined with the philosophical aspect and psychological aspect? How do you think music plays an effect on our lives from like what I just told you?
Yeah, music is really interesting because it's something that, in some ways makes us uniquely human, right? Birds have songs and whales have songs and these sorts of things,
Yeah.
but they're ultimately a means of communication, right? It's not meant to be an artistic endeavor. Um, and music on top of that, what sort of purpose does it serve? What does it accomplish, right? These are all questions that you can ask from a scientific or psychological viewpoint. Whereas, from a philosophical or a humanistic viewpoint, they don't make sense, right? There's no utility to music. That's not why we do it. We do it because it makes us feel a certain way, right? But it resides in several centers in the brain, right? I think that some of the misconceptions about psychology boil down to, as in many things, an oversimplification of mechanisms of action, right? So, genes, for instance, some people like to blame things on their genes. Well, um, yes, everybody has their own unique set of genetics, but we share a lot more in common than we differ. And really, what plays a lot of parts in our genetics is epigenetic changes. So how the environment has the ability to turn certain genes on and off in certain people for whatever reasons, based on stress or based on pollution levels or any other types of things that we don't have a good grasp on yet. Same thing with areas of the brain, right? You'd like to think that there'd be one area of your brain dedicated to music, but there isn't, right? Your brain is a very cross-functional organ. So sure, you have um, you know apparatuses for hearing the music, and storing the memory of the music and the memory of the lyrics and even the memory of the rhythm and cadence of the music. And that's sort of an interesting thing, right? You can see this in speech problems. You have two speech centers in the left side of your brain, and if one goes bad, you can find words, but you sort of have to search for them. It's sort of halting. And if you have a problem in the other section of the brain, you can speak fluently, but all the words are gibberish. And and then you have a center in the right side of the brain that allows people to put emotion and inflection into their voices. And so if that part's damaged, they have to speak in a monotone and they can't recognize emotion in other people's voices, right? So there's several parts of the brain that have to do with music, right? There's the melody, there's the rhythm, there's the lyrical content, there's all of the timbre of the instruments that combine together. So it's engaging, the emotional centers of the brain. It's engaging several different areas. And so that sort of ability of music to engage a bunch of different centers makes it very resilient to damage, right? Whether it's due to dementia or brain damage or this sort of thing. Because if you think about it, yeah, a spoken word, um, you have content there, but that's about the end of it. With music, there's so much more, so that uh, you know, and if you have dementia, you have the ability to draw on several different areas, and all it takes is one or two of them in order to engage the other parts that might not be accessible to pull the memory back out. So yeah, so music is important to us, not just from a physiological level, and, based on how integrated it is. And, we use it to remember things, the letters of the alphabet, and how to wish people happy birthday and all kinds of stuff, right? That are just automatic. So it's not just a learning tool, but it's an emotional tool. It's a communication tool. It serves several different purposes that reflect the fact that it is widely distributed across the neural network.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it's widely distributed across the world as well. And at least from what I've learned and my I've experienced is, I found that music and dance are universal languages. It can be recognized anywhere across the world, no matter where you're at, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion you are. Music and dance can speak to you.
Yeah, yeah, and what one culture considers musically pleasing versus another culture may change, but they have done scans on people's brains and they've determined that, yeah, it doesn't matter what culture the music is from, you can identify music when you hear it. And same thing with dancing. They've done
Yeah.
studies where uh, what you and I were talking about, it might have been before the show, but they'll put dots on people,
Yeah.
and with as few as 3 or 4 dots on the whole human body, um, they'll just record somebody dance, and then they'll show an observer just those 4 dots moving, and they'll be able to know that that was a person dancing. Just
Yeah.
4 disembodied dots moving around. They'll know, oh, that's a dance.
That's
So yeah,
brilliant.
there's some powerful stuff there.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Well, look, Joel, I could talk to you for like a whole nother hour or two or somewhere there. You'll have to come back on the show. We could have another great conversation. And not just
Yeah.
this one. I would really appreciate you coming back. So many more things that we could talk about, but obviously, the pitfalls are time. Time seems
Mm.
to be, it's one of those fleeting things, or one of those things we don't never have enough of, or we could always use more of. And at this point in time, I think I would love to have everybody to understand how to get in touch with you, how to listen to your podcast, how to visit everything about you.
Yeah. So, if you want to see the podcast From Nowhere to Nothing, right up there on the screen, you can find it pretty much anywhere podcasts are out. If you ever want to listen to any of my music, just check out Joel Bouchard music, type it into Google. You'll see all my albums. Most latest one is All We Are. I just finished my most recent novel, but it's not published yet, so you can't find anything there. But yeah, that's about it.
That's quick and easy. And I'll make sure links are in the show notes so that everybody can find you quick and easy. I will look for the link and put the one in there for your album as well, because I appreciate you as a songwriter and a musician as well. I think, again, with my passion for music and from that perspective and performance, I appreciate you as a creative artist and the fact that you are contributing to society that way. So thank you for doing that. I really appreciate it. quick note. How hard is it to write a song?
For me, it's not hard at all. And a lot of people find that frustrating, but I'm a little bit different from most people. Um, and again, I think that comes from being open-minded, being curious, having multiple interests that you can draw on, and not being afraid to fail, right?
Look at Taylor Swift. Do you know that my family and I saw Taylor Swift when she was still going around too? There was a mall up here in Anthem, Arizona, and she showed up to the mall at the Christmas show, and they had built a little tiny stage, not very big, and we watched her on that stage. And my youngest daughter, I said, that woman's going to be a star, that young lady. And my youngest daughter went, I don't think I like her. Now my daughter is nothing but a Swiftie. And what a billion, she just reached $1 billion, $1 billion. So she definitely has songwriting down pat. Down.
Yeah. It's just finding something that you can tap into that people can relate to.
Her, I guess, is get dating and then breaking up and dating and breaking up and dating and breaking up. I wouldn't recommend that path, but one of those things.
Yeah.
Joel, this is one more thing before you go. Before we go, do you have any words of wisdom you can share?
Yeah, no, I think that we've covered a lot in the show, right? Just always keep your eyes open, always take a second look at whatever it is that's around you. And most importantly, have a good time. The only thing that separates a good life from a bad life is perspective, right? If I view the things that come into my way as interesting puzzles to solve rather than horrific obstacles to overcome, then you can't lose.
Brilliant words of wisdom. I think everybody should adopt those. Again, Joel, thank you very much for coming on the show. I'll make sure that everybody's got a link to come to your podcast and to get in touch with you or find your music as well. I'm going to do that as soon as we get off air. And again, I look forward to another conversation with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll come on anytime.
Absolutely. For everyone that's out there, please subscribe and follow me on any of the platforms that you're on there. And one more thing before you all go, have a great day, have a great week, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One More Thing Before You Go. Check out our website at beforeyougopodcast.com. You can find us as well as subscribe to the program and rate us on your favorite podcast listening platform.